Good morning, Mr.
Andrew, I'm saying good morning. Andrew, I'm saying good morning. I'm saying good morning to you, Andrew. I understand. Anyway, good morning. I'm Herb Wesson, joined by my dear friend Ed Reyes. It is Wednesday, the 20th of February. This is the HCD committee hearing. We are going to go through the agenda items very quickly today for a variety of reasons, but more importantly, the chair has something to do. So, with that said, we don't have a quorum, so we'll act, Mr. City Attorney, as a communique from the chair.
That'd be correct, sir.
Okay. So, Ms. Barclay, if you could read items, we're going to try to do 1, 2, 5, and 6 real quick, and then there's a public comment card on item 3. So if you could start off with item 1.
Good morning, Meg Barclay with the CLA's office. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Chief Legislative Analyst awarding public improvement contracts for the construction of streetscape improvements on Lankershim Boulevard.
Okay, without objection, we'll adopt, or as a communique from the chair, we'll adopt the CLA report item 2.
Item 2 are reports from the Los Angeles Housing Department and the City Administrative Officer relative to the issuance of up to $7 million in supplemental tax-exempt multifamily housing bonds for the Broadway Plaza Apartments project.
Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt the CAO report, send it to council as a communique from the chair. Item 5.
Item 5 is a motion, Rosendahl Reyes, relative to extending the expenditure deadline for CDBG funds allocated for the purchase of a motel to be by Upward Bound House for the creation of an emergency family shelter.
Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt the motion. Item 6, you can read it, but we're going to continue this item.
Item 6 is a city attorney report pursuant to motion Alarcon-Zine relative to the feasibility of requiring landlords to check the Megan's Law database before renting or leasing space to a tenant.
Okay, that item will be continued. Now, if you could read item 3.
Item 3 are reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to loan agreements with the East LA Community Corporation in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million for the development of the Cuatro Vientos multifamily rental housing project.
Okay, I have a card from the public. Clyde Thomas Williams, please come forward. Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Clyde Thomas Williams. I'm a resident of 20 years at 4115 Barrett Road in Los Angeles, 90032, within 500 feet of the proposed project. I'm also a stakeholder within the LA 32 Neighborhood Council in business development. And one of the things that we're concerned about is, first off, the CRA does not coordinate well with the Neighborhood Council. We seldom, if ever, see them, although they have a major project in the Adelante along Valley Boulevard. The proposed project is on Huntington Drive, just about as far away from Valley as you can get. Valley needs the same sort of housing, but we don't understand quite why it's coming up on Huntington. Last year, it was reviewed by a one-person committee and was approved by the Neighborhood Council. So I'm somewhat concerned about the lack of coordination between the CRA and the Neighborhood Council, at least in El Sereno, LA 32 NC. So, there's some other things also that appropriate housing, I believe, would be better off in the Valley corridor, which is part of Adelante. There's some reference in the materials that were provided that this project is adjacent to the CRA Adelante. It's about a mile away, so I don't know about the funding. There's some technical aspects also that it needs to be a bit more pedestrian friendly to the people that live along Almont, which is on the top side of it. The old 1930s housing that is adjacent to it actually had sidewalks going from Almont down to Huntington Drive North. There's also some geological elements to the Almont Road, our street, that have shown that the previous development to the west of the proposed project has caused stress in the street, and there's a drop of about 2 inches in parts of the pavement. So there should be a thorough geotechnical study done of the upper part of the proposed project.
Okay, Doctor, you can you can begin to wrap it up. I'm giving you a little extra
There's only
time.
one more element.
Okay, since you're a doctor,
Yeah. Okay.
I'll be nice to you.
Okay. We need pedestrian access from the Huntington Drive North to the Poplar, which is the only grocery store within walking distance of the proposed project. And since the planning department has a pedestrian-friendly element in their do real planning, it seems kind of incongruous.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Reyes?
What's the nearest major street? That's,
Okay, the proposed project is across a small divider from the Poplar-Huntington Drive intersection,
okay.
which has the only grocery store in the area.
Is that near Eastern? Is that near Eastern Avenue?
Now, you might say Eastern, Van Horn, Poplar,
Okay.
Maycrest.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
PhD or MD? PhD or MD, doctor? What kind of doctor? MD or, you said doctor, I was just being nosy.
No, PhD.
Okay. Didn't mean to startle you. Okay, what we're going to do now, that brings us to item 4, and then I have general comment. Okay, a bird just whispered in my ear that we should do general comment first, so if I could get Deborah Burton and Eric Ayers come forward. Before you speak, since there are no more questions or concerns where it relates to item 3, then we'll adopt the CAO report, send it to council as a communique from the chair. Ms. Burton.
Yes, my name is Deborah Burton. I'm with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. As you know, about 1,500 units of residential hotels exist in the city of Los Angeles, most of which are located in Council District 9, 10, 13, and 14, or adjacent to committee members. All of these districts are going through some form of redevelopment, putting these residential hotels at risk of being lost or converted. In response, with the leaderships of members of this committee, a moratorium was passed in 2006 to protect these units and tenants, but the moratorium protection these units expires in May. The second extension will be up. We are here this morning to give this committee a friendly reminder that a permanent residential hotel ordinance has been in the drafting stage for almost 2 years. It is our sincere hope that this committee will consider this ordinance very soon so that there is no gaps in protection for existing low-income tenants. We represent a broad coalition of community groups, nonprofit housing developers, labor unions, and tenants of residential hotels throughout the city of Los Angeles. We are asking this committee to ensure that an ordinance is released for public input by March 1st, so that the public process can be completed by the end of April. We know the housing development faces other urgent matters and that the city budget is a priority. However, it is our understanding that a draft ordinance has been prepared, and we are urging this committee to keep this important preservation efforts a priority for this spring as well. We will follow up with you to see that we can work together to get a permanent residential hotel preservation ordinance passed in the coming months.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilman Wesson. Good morning. My name is Eric Ades, and I am with Housing Los Angeles, a broad coalition of over 75 community organizations, affordable housing developers, labor unions, and religious congregations advocating for the production and preservation of affordable housing in LA. Housing LA and all of its members fully support, like Deborah, a permanent residential hotel ordinance. I'm here to offer a reminder that a permanent residential hotel ordinance has been in a drafting stage for almost 2 years, and to encourage the community members to consider this ordinance very soon. Housing LA believes that protecting these 1,500 units of residential housing is critical to the long-term affordable housing needs of the city, and we hope that this committee will ensure that an ordinance will be released to the public input by March 1st, so that the public process can be completed by the end of April. Leadership of members of this committee in 2006 resulted in a moratorium that protected these units, but this moratorium expires in May. We call on the members of this committee to once again take leadership on this issue and consider the ordinance very soon. Thank you.
Okay, we will look into that. I don't know if we can do it by March 1st, but we will get on it immediately. I'll find out where it is. Thank you both for coming this morning.
Thank you.
Ms. Barclay, that brings us to item 4.
Item 4 is a motion, Garcetti Reyes, relative to instructing the Los Angeles Housing Department to report on the impact of community development block grant cuts to the city's homeownership program.
So if we could have the mayor's office and the housing department please come forward. Good morning, Helmy, Mercedes, good to see you both. We've just been joined by Council President Eric Garcetti, so we have a quorum. If you could maybe give me 2 seconds, we could take care of some housekeeping business. Mr. Garcetti, on items 1, 2, 3, and 5, we already took action to move that as a communique from the chair. Since you're here, would it be okay?
Absolutely.
He's supportive, so without objection, and your chair supports El Presidente as well. Okay, so with that said, that brings us to item 4. Good morning, and who's going to start?
Well, why don't I start with just a few, a few comments. Helmy Hisrick, Mayor's Office. I just wanted to be here this morning to respond to the question from the mayor's perspective. The proposed CDBG budget, as you know, has a significant decline in dollars, and so we've been struggling, frankly, to figure out how to fund everything with not enough funding. On the home ownership assistance program, the mayor views home ownership assistance as highly important and recognizes that the council sees this as highly important. And in particular, foreclosure, with the foreclosure issues that are out there, we need to be strategic and thoughtful about how to respond to foreclosure issues. The question is whether CDBG is the best source of capital to respond to this problem. In the proposed CDBG budget, the mayor's proposal funds the staffing at LAHD fully. In fact, at the CEO's recommendation, it's increased to support full cost recovery to keep funds from the general fund into the full staffing of the CDBG. The capital dollars, though, have been decreased, and the thinking behind that is that in this time of a very tight budget, our departments need to be more strategically aligned. Both the CRA and the Housing Authority have made it very clear that they have millions of dollars that can be spent on home ownership and can be spent on foreclosure assistance. The problem that we have is that there hasn't been historically a culture of these departments working together strategically. So it has been, with this budget cut, it's also been with a great deal of discussion by me and with the general managers of the departments, that they work together to develop a strategy that brings the departments together. And so they are at the beginning of those discussions. I don't know that they have a strategy yet, but the idea was not to impede homeownership or to stop a response to foreclosure, but in fact to leverage the city's total resources in a much more strategic way, and to stop what I call fighting over scraps, looking to resources that are declining to to resolve problems such as the homeownership and foreclosure issue that we're facing. So that was the thinking behind it, and I'll leave the rest to LAHD to respond.
Mercedes?
Good morning. Your scheduling is a bit ahead of our capacity at the moment, given the budget, to provide something in writing to you. So I hope you'll accept a verbal report. The motion specifically asked what the impact of the CDBG cuts would be on LHD's homeownership program, and asked us to speak about recommendations for how to use what we have strategically. And so we've done that. I would like to start, one, by giving you just a summary of what we've done in the last 5 years, and I'll be very brief. First, I think it's important that we have both a low and moderate income homebuyer program. The moderate income homebuyer program is relatively new to the city. Up until 2005, the city had never had one before. And that is largely because the homeownership programs, like most housing department programs that are, lending programs in general, are funded through federal dollars. CDBG and home dollars are all capped at 80% of median, right? In our city currently, for a family of four, 80% of median is $56,400. Right? So up till now, all of our programs have been funded and have to serve people at 80% or below. Given that we are a real estate-driven market, and given what the history of real estate has been in the last several years, that had been incredibly difficult to achieve for families at 80% or below. Nonetheless, in 2004, you asked me to take a whole new look at the housing department. We did. We revamped every single program, including homeownership. And we've seen pretty remarkable results with that, even with those 80% dollars. Since 2003 through last year, the housing department as a whole, both low and moderate, had made 717 homeownership loans. LHD assistance totaled nearly $61.5 million. That leveraged an additional $168 million in change in development, right, or new homeownership. The total value of the real estate that we've invested in is nearly $226 million just for low-income homeownership. We tried to do something that we hadn't done before, was to provide you a leverage ratio like we do when we take a look at the trust fund, so that we could start to speak apples to apples on leverage. And what we have found is that as a whole, right, as a whole, we are, for every dollar that LHD invests in home ownership, whether it be low income or moderate, this is a blended rate, we leverage $3.70 in private home ownership real estate, right? That, of course, goes immediately to the tax base, that $226 million over the last 5 years. And it supports many other businesses, whether they're realtors or they're title companies, insurance companies, the banks. So this money is spread all throughout the local economy. I would like to break down the low-income portion specifically because that is what CDBG funds, right? So in the last 5 years, the majority of the 717 loans that we've made actually are to low-income families. 407 loans have been made in the last 5 years. Our assistance is at a little over $38 million. The entire value of the real estate for low-income families is nearly $112 million. We have leveraged for every dollar. We are leveraging for low-income families $202.90 for them. Not bad, particularly because they need more assistance. So our low-income programs are more generous than the moderate-income program because they need to be, but are well within policy bounds. For moderate-income homebuyers, obviously their buying capacity is greater. So as a result, our leverage is greater. But of course, that is done totally with either general funded dollars, general funds, or municipal finance income that we receive, right? No federal dollars can be used legally for anybody above 80. And this is, we only started this program and launched it in mid-2005. So these are the results, really just with 2.5 years of work for moderate-income families. We have made 310 loans to moderate-income families. Our total assistance is nearly $23.5 million. The total value of the real estate for moderate-income families is just above $117 million. So you can see the difference because they have more buying power. Even though we've put in less in the moderate-income program, the value of the real estate for moderate-income families is, of course, higher. Now, this is the interesting part about our leverage. When you take a look at the total development cost, for every dollar of LHD assistance, we have leveraged $5 for moderate-income home buyers. So overall, not bad. That's only 2.5 years of work. I want to tell you that this staff really deserves quite a hand for what they've been able to do in such a short period of time. Thank you, sir. What does that look like? So overall, all of our funds have leveraged over $168 million in both public and private financing for home ownership. That includes understanding that we have relationships with the state, with Cal FHA, with Cal Home, all these things we've been able to do. What I also wanted to talk about is that we've also taken a look at where these buyers lived prior to becoming homeowners. And what we know, and this is our aim, and to actually increase this, 73% of all homeowners that have been assisted by LAHD were previously LA City renters. That is very important, that we turn around our own housing stock. We would like to, in the future, make sure that we preference LA City renters, residents, in our homeownership programs. But even without having done a formal preference, we're already at 73% citywide. So we're pretty pleased with that statistic. Who are we helping? A cross-section of LA City home buyers, working in a cross-section of fields, lots of teachers and people in teaching professions, teachers' aides, lots of folks in teaching, peace officers, firefighters, nurses, technicians, caretakers, and workers in the hospitality and service industries. So we've reached a broad range of Angelenos. As I said, we've increased property tax revenues and local employment through real estate agents, loan officers, escrow and title companies, and construction jobs. Also, our partnerships with the state have dramatically increased. We do a monthly home ownership training program at DWP on Saturdays. So once a month on Saturday, we are DWP, and we offer a free 8-hour home ownership seminar that is sponsored. George is usually there as one of the instructors. On a monthly basis, we receive folks coming in to attend the seminar. Over 300 prospective home buyers on a regular basis every month come in for that training. This year, obviously, is a very tough year. We would, with the budget before us at the current funding level, we would be receiving 25% of what it is we did last year. I think, though, that the impacts, obviously, are great. It impacts any opportunity to do any really targeted South LA program. In fact, I will tell you that given what we're facing with foreclosures, even if we were to having a banner year in CDBG funding, right? If we were not facing this, I would still make the same recommendation to you. And that is that we have to, for at least the next 2 years, turn our homeownership program, and as a result, the homeownership policies of both the Housing Authority and the CRA on their head. We must focus on neighborhood stabilization. We must focus on neighborhood stabilization. So from our point of view, what I would encourage and what I would love to hear back from you is that I feel that what is necessary, at least for LAHD at this moment, we feel that we need to suspend our regular walk-in program. We need to target all of our resources at where the data tells us the neighborhoods in most dire crisis will be. As the information comes in, we know that in the Northeast Valley and in South Los Angeles, the foreclosure process will be staggeringly detrimental to those neighborhoods. We will see things like we saw in Watts in the 90s, and this is having a year alert on a tsunami and not paying attention to it. I would ask you to support LAHD's work in actually suspending a walk-in program, canceling the waiting list, which is over 300 people, to target our dollars to where the data tells us they should be spent. We have already hired a consultant. They've been working with us for 6 weeks. We've purchased all of the DataQuick information that is necessary. They are out there talking to banks. They are going to come forward with a report on recommendations on what we could possibly do. We will take that report, come back to you, come back to the mayor's office and our sister agencies to have a discussion about what possibly can we do. This is a post-foreclosure strategy. We will only be able to do something once the value and the pricing of these homes drops dramatically. There's no way we could step in right now. This is a post-foreclosure strategy. Now, the issue of counseling and helping those folks that are in the foreclosure process now or are in danger, that is what we can do. That and the bully pulpit and working with state and federal folks to help curb that tie. That is where the issue of working with banks lies. We don't have that jurisdiction. So this is a post-foreclosure strategy. But I really believe that this is where it is. We have sat down with our team, and regardless of what the funding on CDBG would be, we would come back and tell you that we should do a shift for at least 2 years. The resets on these loans are going to continue through 2008. So the real pain we will face, people are frightened now, but the actual prospect of losing homes and neighborhoods being empty is what will come at the end of this year and through 2009. So we need to refocus. That's what I want to tell you. You can see what we've been able to do. With the funding, we will need capital funding, acquisition funding. I think we can get that from a private source. I think we can get a line of credit where the homes themselves are the guarantee to purchase them. But what we are in need of, and this is what between agencies and CDBG funding, we have to look at the takeout financing, right? We can acquire that, but we have to be able to take people out with soft seconds, and we're going to need money for rehab, particularly in South Los Angeles. Many of those homes that were bought with these subprime loans were homes that are in need of rehab. And when you put them back on the market, particularly to low-income families, we have to rehab them first because they can't afford to rehab them themselves. So we're going to have to come forward with homeownership reacquisition loans like we have now, but very targeted to neighborhoods in need.
Let me ask a quick question, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Reyes to complete this item because I do have somewhere to go. But I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, which, I mean, they have blocks and blocks and blocks of houses that have been foreclosed and they're boarded up. In fact, Mr. Reyes, you probably already know this, they have homeless that have just literally went in and have taken these. Do you anticipate that it might be that bad here?
I don't think it will be that bad in the terms of the entire city of Cleveland. You're right. At the moment, the vacancy rate for single-family homes in Cleveland, Ohio, is 10%. That citywide, 10% of single-family homes are vacant. We don't anticipate that happening here as a whole. However, that's why I'm talking about targeting. In select neighborhoods, in select census tracts, we could face that. When that happened in Watts in the 90s, we know what happened there. Those homes were boarded up with best efforts of the city to keep them, right, fenced. What happened? The police, right, enormous amount of new work had to be done. More police had to be sent there because gangs and others took over those vacant properties. This is now, we know that that's what could happen. We have to be very careful about understanding where it is that buying a home would make a huge difference with limited resources. So what I'm saying is no, not citywide, but in select neighborhoods, I think so, sir.
I had just saw, I think it was last week, a special where, I mean, I could see neighborhoods where I grew up, where the whole block, and that, I can't remember the statistics, but I mean literally, and I guess what's the word, squatters, they've just come in,
Yes.
and they've just, taken over. So it was the intention of this committee to hold this in committee until I believe next week, and we would discuss it. But with that said, I know that Mr. Reyes has some more questions, and I'm sure Mr. Garcetti does, because the motion was authored by him and Mr. Reyes. So with that said, Wingman,
Okay, Mr. Chair?
you've got the wheel.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Well, first, I want to applaud you and your team for the production and effectiveness of how your department has moved forward since you've taken over. But I wanted to ask regarding the private sector. I mean, you see the tsunami. This is the one-year alert, as you said. The other leaders of that industry must be seeing it too. What's the dialogue like? Are they looking at the city for a partnership? Are they waiting for us to move first? What kind of dialogue is out there, if you can share that?
Well, despite the innovation that is possible in the private sector, when there is a crisis like this, the private sector is always waiting for the government to move first.
Okay.
What I can tell you is that there is already significant discussion with lenders, with others involved, whether it's nonprofits that are providing the foreclosure counseling, whether it is folks that are rehabbing, whether it's foundations. I'm hoping will come back to you, but not just led by LHD. This is something that has to have all agencies involved. It has to have city council offices involved, the mayor's office involved, along with philanthropy, lenders, and business. This is something that is so big for us, and our dollars to address it are so scarce that it is a multi-disciplined, a multi-sector approach that has to take place. So we've already begun that discussion with folks like the LA Business Council. I've had this discussion with the Enterprise Foundation, with the Weingart Foundation, about having a broader approach, and with some of you as well as the mayor's office, to move forward. So we're looking at that. What our consultant is now doing is actually speaking with lenders. They, depending on the market focus, right, of the different lending groups, they're tracking different zip codes, right? Some are concentrated in the Northeast Valley, so they're taking a look at our hotspots. Others are looking in South LA. We are looking at all of that information to help us figure out what would be the right formula, right? What is it that, given scarce dollars, where do you, in a huge problem, where do you determine that you're best focused, right? Once we have that sense, then that's when agencies will be challenged, because we're probably going to have findings by the redevelopment agency to broaden outside of the redevelopment areas in South LA, since there's slivers, right? We may have to take a look at what it is the Housing Authority can do to purchase homes for Section 8 tenants, to have those homes occupied, right? It's a varied approach, and I think lenders are very interested in working with us.
Just from a very general perspective, certain council offices have been pretty proactive in how they want to look at housing projects. There's programs that are they're cooking on the oven. I mean,
Sure.
We're trying to make things happen. This restructuring and reassessment, does that mean we abandon what's already in front of us? Does it mean we cut back, or is it just we're not there yet? We really can't speak to that.
Well, there's no, I mean, when you're going to start a year with 25% of what you had, obviously, right, it's a cutback. And I wouldn't want to do what I think has been done before in the housing department before I arrived. And that was people would just retrench to whatever the funding level was without analyzing if it made sense to go forward, right? You get to the point of diminishing returns. Now, I would want it, just the funding level alone, such a severe cut, requires us to rethink, because you can't run the kind of program we've been running on that kind of money, right? You lose lenders because there's no point of getting in line when so few will get funded. So our business would have to change dramatically if it's just a funding issue. There's no question about that. But given the foreclosure issues, we would have to take a new look anyway. So what I am saying to you, that my sense is that for at least 2 years, we're going to have to think dramatically different about home ownership and understand that home ownership for at least 2 years may be neighborhood stabilization as we work our way through foreclosures. And I think that if we embrace that challenge, that we will have a much better impact in neighborhoods than if we just continue and the small drips of money that we have won't be noticed anywhere. We have to focus on what it is. So unfortunately, Councilman, it will change the plans, some of the plans that you have. There's no question it will.
Thank you. Councilman Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair / Acting Chair. I appreciate you joining me on this motion as well. And there's a few things I'd like to ask, and I'm going to be excused on city business next week. I won't be here for the con plan, but one of the things I'd like LAHD to report back, as this is held in committee for next week, is on strategic recommendations regarding the use of home ownership funds to mitigate the foreclosure crisis. and then also request the CRA report on their homeownership programs for informational purposes, so that we can hear a little bit more of that context. Maybe we should add HACLA to that as well, if that's a source of funding for homeownership, so that we can have full understanding of their programs, but also the flip side, the requirements and available funding, especially, you know, underwriting requirements and restrictions, because I think that's one of the other things that their money, it's great, but it also can't always be used everywhere. And we've run into this in the past, you know, we've experienced this directly firsthand, where, you know, we might have projects that are outside project areas for the redevelopment, et cetera. And certainly moderate income is not always a place where some of these dollars can be used as well. I also, the decline in dollars, the other thing that I'm concerned of is just housing dollars in general. And I know our great deputy mayor shares the same concern, but it's the first place people go to. So in the con plan, we have a dramatic decline in dollars. It's not because Washington has dramatically cut it as much as our program income has gone down for this year, though we've seen dramatic cuts in past years. So that's an important part of that discussion. It's not just cuts from DC. Secondly, though, I mean, I saw that the CAO recommended when we have the mid-year, which we're going to deal with in council, it was like, take $4 million from general fund from the housing trust fund. When it's tough times here in the con plan, even though CDD is a much larger entity that could take a much smaller hit to make some of this more whole, it worries me that that's the first place that everybody goes to. And it's always like, oh, another piece will make that whole, but if we're taking from each one of those pieces, suddenly there is less housing money out there at the most critical moment in the city's kind of housing, or at least recent history. So, you know, I think that we need to be looking at that, especially too. I don't know, CDD and LAHD always fall into a strange place during budget crisis, because all the rest of the departments kind of have their percentage that they have to slice. And then because the funding doesn't come necessarily through the general fund, there's a different approach there, CRA as well. But that said, I want to make sure that that's being shared evenly, and that all departments are being asked to cut. You know, we've made two exceptions, that being LAPD and LAFD, because those are critical core services. Not that every department doesn't have critical core services, but I do want the committee, and just kind of flag this maybe for the CLA, to look at, and I'll talk to the chair about what sort of, you know, CDD absorptions can help out other departments, because it would be a small percentage of their overall, but it certainly would keep some of these housing cuts to a minimum. And I don't want us to go back to what happened when the city shifted full scale during the 90s, our block grant money away from housing. And then we spent the last however many years making that a part of the priority of the block grant again, only to see that momentum of 6 years rolled back potentially. And that was, I think, when people asked how do we get into this housing crisis, it was many things. It was our NIMBYism, it was you know, a lack of vision and strategic plans in our communities, which I know Mr. Reyes has been very passionate about. But part of it too was that the city said, you know, let's revitalize neighborhoods instead of look at housing as revitalizing neighborhoods. And we, you know, compared to other cities, really moved that money, that block grant money, out of housing and into other community development programs. So I would hate for us, because the council's been pretty unified moving it back, to see that cut too much.
If we could add to that report back, what existing programs are there for folks to be informed about their rights in terms of protecting themselves? Many folks get that notice from the bank, and then they just leave. They're not aware of the options and how they can negotiate with the bank. Do we have anything in writing that allows us to distribute that to the neighborhoods that we represent? Perhaps give some folks something to hold on to in terms of how to approach the business of foreclosing or changing the terms of their loans, or qualifying for different programs. Folks aren't just aware that they have that option. If there's anything like that that currently exists, we can get that out into the neighborhoods now as soon as possible. With I have town hall meetings and neighborhood meetings, and we can distribute that and get people educated how to defend themselves. And I've already heard some folks coming in asking people to buy out their loans and basically getting them into more trouble, and other folks taking over properties, and a underhanded type moves that just don't sound legitimate. And that's something that we would hope to prevent. So that being said, any more questions? Okay, so again, thank you. We'll be hearing from you again next week.
Yes.
We'll continue this and appreciate, again, all your hard work. You guys have your finger in a dam that's breaking, so hang in there.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. Anything else on the agenda? I don't think.
No, sir.
Okay, and they already took care of public hearing?
Excuse me?
We take care of general comment for the committee?
I believe
We did that already.
Sorry,
Okay.
take care of.
That being said, this meeting is adjourned.
Let me double check. I don't know what happened yesterday.